Hey guys, what's up? It's Tommy here, and I'm a black Latino queer man living in Florida. Today is my father's birthday. My father's heavenly birthday. My dad passed away February 4th of the year 2021. So, if I haven't mentioned to you guys before, my dad was a pastor and a gospel singer. And today, well, actually, for the last week or two, I've been thinking a lot about our process and what he had to go through. My dad was definitely the dude that was very committed, right? Committed to showing me unconditional love. And at times, I felt guilty about that. In fact, sometimes I still struggle with a lot of guilt when it comes to our relationship, but not necessarily because of the way we were with each other. We did have our difficulties, but through all our difficulties, my dad and I always try to meet in the middle and come back together. So my love for my family is very big. I did a lot. We did a lot to be able to stay together as a family. Why am I telling you this? For one, I want to get off my chest. Right. I've been carrying things around for a while. When you're raised in a certain environment, sometimes you don't talk and you don't share things about yourself because you're scared of judgment. Next reason why is because maybe I can help other people with my story. Maybe you're a parent or someone who is queer and you're having difficulty trying to mend relationships. So that's why I'm doing it. So my pops was a youth pastor, and it was really fun, honestly. Without talking about my experience as a queer kid, but just it was fun. My dad played really cool music, and I remember he had a radio show for a little while, and so my dad played Christian music, but with kind of poppy and some rock and rap and whatever we could find our hands on that was Christian. And even though it had a Christian message and there was some people who actually believed in God in a certain particular way, they would still call up the radio station like, "Oh, that's devil music" and things of that nature. And it was always funny because my dad would take those things with a grain of salt. My dad had a very big personality. He was a very charming man, but he also was a big teddy bear. He's a big, big teddy bear. And I could say with all honesty that my dad really loved God, really, really loved God, and was really committed to living a life of Christ. In fact, he would always say it's about Jesus. And as his kid, and I can honestly tell you that it was about that. My dad didn't sit around judging people. He was always helping someone out. And sometimes he would help to in my eyes, a tad bit too much. So even though I am an only child, I've never really lived by myself. It's always been some kid that he's taken in, which would be a lady and her infant and helping them get on their feet. And it was I call her my aunt now, so it would be my aunt and her two daughters and getting them here. They're now nurse practitioners and a bunch of people, kids that were on the wrong path that he led to a better path. Now, not all of those kids stayed in church, but they did stay out of jail and they did stay off the drugs. So I think it's a win-win situation. And even when my dad stopped pastoring and just kept, ministering, his approach was always the same, to love people unconditionally and to help them get closer to a higher power, in which we choose to call God. The bond with my dad was tight, right? And so one of the hard things about being a pastor's kid is you having to share your parents with the community. And sometimes it would really frustrate me. It still does. I am still a very jealous son. But with that being said, I learned to play drums. My dad was in the band, so that's how I got in, and that allowed us to spend a little more time with each other. And, I got to travel with him and, be around my dad. I have some pretty interesting stories about traveling and playing gigs in other countries, and some of the silly things that would happen to us We just have like crazy stories. The best one for me has always been, I think we're playing a gig in Chile, and it was a really big stadium, and everything was perfect that night. Like the drum set was perfect, the sound was perfect, everything was perfect. And I remember that night being like one of the highlights of being with my dad. But then there was also cool things of like seeing my dad just be my dad. So it was kind of like, at one point my dad could be Superman, he could be like, and other times he could be like Clark Kent, basically. Here is where the struggle really began. I have always been visibly queer, like always. Even when I dressed and presented a different way. Always been visibly queer, always had issues with people like talking about me and, making assumptions. And sometimes, like, the weird thing about being a queer kid is that the minute you start to show that you're different, people already start putting assumptions on you, like judgment, and that could cause like a lot of depression. At least for me, it caused me a lot of depression and anxiety, and it made me feel like I could never be authentic, ever. I learned really to hide my feelings a lot, and I'm still undoing a lot of that, even now that I'm 40-something years old. I came out twice, because I think most of the time when people are trans, from my generation, we come out more than once, right? The first time I came out as a gay female, but I was still very masculine and stuff like that, and I went the route that most people shouldn't go, but I actually had a little conversion therapy situation, and came back more messed up from that situation than ever before. There was a lot of like trauma that I was dealing with. And then, people telling my father that he should kick me out of the house. And I realized that my dad was having a hard time, you know. So, unfortunately or fortunately, however you see it, I led a double life. I led the life that when I was around my parents and my family and stuff like that, I was one way. And then I was with my friends, I was another way. And I did that for a lot of different reasons. One, because people say they want to see who you are, who you really are, but that's not true. A lot of times people can't handle the truth. And then two, unfortunately, when we talk about the Christian community as a community, there's a lot of gossip, right? And just because I'm his kid, that already puts so much pressure for me to live up to some kind of ridiculous standard. So I know that whatever I did was a reflection on him. Even this video right now is hard to make without thinking about repercussions, right? Because people are mean. They don't understand. And even if they think they understand on a surface level, but you won't understand on a deeper level, right? So with that being said, fast forward, I came out again, right? This time as trans. Really, it was a really hard time for both of us, right? I was going through this like phase of having to face what could be, and also being very elated that I knew what was going on. Him also knowing that he knew that something was up with me since I was 4, and not really surprised at my coming out. More worried, I would say. He was worried, and he had all the right to be worried. He was worried about my safety. That was one. He was worried about people treating me a certain way. But my dad, there was a time where you couldn't talk about me. He would stop you in your tracks, if you tried to talk badly about me. So even though the world would try to make or break up our relationship, that wasn't going to happen. And I could not be more proud of my dad for that, because I think a lot of times when people have queer kids, instead of trying to understand that you can't change anyone, just like no one can change you, they kick their kids out as if that's supposed to be the answer to things, just running away from the issue. The other thing is that we are Black Latinos, so there were times that we faced colorism and very subdued racism, and I saw my dad handle all of that with charm and grace and with empathy and love, and never sought revenge, even when people treated him badly. I remember one time I was sitting down in the house, and he was saying how this other pastor had invited him to have dinner with him. And so my dad, obliged, and they were going to have dinner. And then the conversation all turned to about me. And why, like, basically that pastor wanted him to cut ties with me. And I think, it's one thing to believe that I'm going to hell. Great. It's another thing to meddle in someone's life and try to get their parents not to talk to them because it's just wrong. It's just wrong. I don't care what you believe. Like, at that point, it's just wrong. If you tell me, oh, it's a sin, great. Honestly, you will not be judged for my sins, and I will not be judged for yours. So at the end of the day, when my dad goes to heaven and meets God, God's not going to be like, oh, you loved your trans son, so therefore, I'm going to send you to hell because you loved your trans son. Do you understand how weird that sounds? Anyway, I digress. We fought to keep each other close. Like it was genuinely a fight. And it pains me to say so. So on his birthday, today, I acknowledge the fight that my pops had to stay loving me unconditionally. Acknowledge the fight that he went through. I also acknowledge that people were probably freaking jealous of the way my dad loved me or loves me. Maybe that's probably why when queer kids get supported or queer adults get supported by their family, people that have to perform in order to get love from their families, that's probably why they're pissy. Maybe. I don't know. But I just want to tell you that it is possible to hold on to your faith and to also hold on to people that you love who may not believe like you, who may not think like you, who may not have the same experiences you do. So, happy birthday, Papa. I love you. And I guess one day when I cross the Rainbow Bridge, we will have our deep discussions again. You guys have a good one.